inconvenience. It was, well, I don't want to use the bad word, so...
Don't worry about it, dear. This happens all the time. Don't worry about it. Come on, let's get on with it.
Let's roll with it. So, are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, let's begin. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the interview with Deirdre McCloskey. Hello, all international fans of ad personam all around the world. All three of them. I'm honored to actually be host of today's interview with one of the greatest economic and political science minds in today's world, Mr. McCloskey. Mrs. McCloskey, sorry. Would you kindly actually present yourself to the people that might be actually not familiar with your works or your person at all?
I start by saying I'm a longtime friend of Poland. I live in Chicago, which, as you know, is the second largest Polish city in the world. And so I've been to Poland a number of times, and I have lots of Polish friends, Barbara Czerniawska and lots of others. And I'm like a lot of people who care for your country, I'm worried about it, about its turn to the right, to essentially a version of fascism, and I don't think that's what you all really want. I'm an economist by training. I was trained at Harvard, but then my first job where I had tenure was at the University of Chicago. So I'm also a Chicago school economist. But then I started as a Marxist way back when I was a teenager. And then I became, after Chicago, an Austrian economist. And now I advocate what I call humanomics, which is economics that uses mathematics and statistics and experiments and observation and so forth, but also uses the resources of what we call in English the humanities, philosophy, novels, plays, movies, history, for understanding the economy. And I think the understanding I've come to is that the key to economic success is a free society. Free in the sense of permissions, allowing people to try things out, to try out a new product, whether buying it or selling it, and so forth. So I'm in favor of a liberal economy, and I think I also call liberalism adultism, because all other economic political philosophies treat people like children. And, it's nice to be in a family and be a child and be comfortable, but we all should want to be adults. Now, we should help each other. I call myself a Christian liberal. I'm an Anglican. So I believe we have an obligation to the poor, but the main obligation we have to the poor is to permit them to flourish as adults. So that's me.
I see. Well, your experience and your work, I don't know, life experience is undoubtful. And well, I guess our viewers will be fascinated to actually hear what you will say about the questions we present to you. So, dear viewers, Mrs. Deirdre will be presented with the 6 questions about the whole liberal structure of life, of the economics, and actually the whole system around the liberalism. So, without further ado, let's begin with our first question.
Certainly.
Ms. McCloskey, according to numerous social groups, is the trade unions that have forced the change in labor conditions, like working benefits, like 8-hour-long workday, social benefits, parental bonuses, etc. Do you agree with this thesis? If not,
No.
how has the free market impacted the labor conditions in the post-industrial era?
Well, I
Here
certainly,
you have the floor.
I certainly do not agree. Although I've been a member of 2 trade unions in my life, and I approve of them, I'm not against them, I don't think they or laws that Parliament may pass are the real engine of enrichment of ordinary Poles or Americans. It's innovation that's the engine. And if you stop and think about it, it's very strange to suppose that a law or a strike by a trade union could greatly increase the income of the worker. The theory behind a lot of economic policy, and it's a mistaken theory, is that these bosses, the capitalists, have masses of gold in their back room, which they're hiding from us. And that our job, if that were true, it would be a very good idea for us to go on strike and to petition Parliament and so forth to make them give us, the workers, I'm a worker, more.
Exactly. We hear numerous voices that I don't know, Bezos or Musk should pay more workers because that's a fracture of the income every year.
That's
You don't
right.
agree with that?
No, I certainly don't, because the enrichment of these few people like Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller or Musk or whoever is a signal in the economy. It says, do what they're doing, you other people. It's not so much their income that's at stake. So in any case, the bosses, the capitalists on the whole, don't have this gold in the back room. And so we can't just demand shorter hours and higher wages and better working conditions. The way Poles actually got those, the way Americans or French people or whatever got them, is through innovation, as I said, through doing things better, through the creativity of free humans in thinking up new ways of making steel or making computers or whatever, or doing healthcare. And so that's what we need to encourage. We need to encourage what I call innovism, which I think is a much better word than capitalism for what our free societies are. So, you know, it would be wonderful if just going on strike could get you higher wages. It can get you a little higher wages, what, 5%, 10% more. But understand, in 1800, the average Polish person earned in present day prices, the prices you would pay now in Warsaw, $2 a day. Think about trying to live on $2 a day.
Well,
now,
many people are still living about $2 a day.
They are, but a much smaller percentage of the world's population. In fact, the absolute number of such people earning $2 a day has been falling steadily for the last 30 or 40 years. Now, the average Pole earns and spends every day about $80 in the same prices. This isn't just about money. And that's an increase of factor of 40. Now, it's perfectly obvious that laws passed by Parliament or going on strike can't increase your income by a factor of 40. If we want the poor of the world, the wretched of the earth, to be better off, we need to let the economy work.
I see that. So the thing is that numerous left-wing politicians are saying that we need to actually codify the whole law to make many restrictions towards the the workspace. And furthermore, in Poland, there is even a thing that actually more than 100 jobs are actually obligated to be regulated by the state. You have to actually be registered to actually be able to do some job. So you think that it is actually not essential?
It's a terrible idea, and it happened in my own country too. In 1950, now hear this, about 5% of occupations in the United States required a license from the state. Lawyers, doctors, a few others. Now, 20% of occupations require a license from the state. This is completely unnecessary. I told you I was an economist, and we economists don't have any state license. If you wanted to set up by, say, Zoom or something as an economist in the United States, I couldn't stop you. You're perfectly free to call yourself an economist and offer economic advice if you want. And that's how it should be.
And with the jobs like the doctors and the jobs like, I don't know, constructors, architects, that actually life depends on, do you think that they should be regulated? No?
No. There are two alternatives that can take care of the safety problem. One is market reputation. If doctors want to have their own, not state-enforced licensing, that's fine with me. If they want to say, look, it's like a brand in a department store or something. The department store says, look, we aren't going to promise this, as it were, not to cheat you. And then you go to that department store instead of the other one down the street, which does not guarantee it. So that in fact is probably the main way of doing it. Market reputation. The other way, which is also very effective, is what's called in English law torts. It means suing people for damages. So if a doctor is a bad doctor, we do this a lot in the United States, you sue him. So both of these provide all the incentives that are needed for safety. In fact, there's a great danger, and I see it in the United States very clearly, that if the government certifies something, people think it's perfectly safe. You perhaps have heard about this this high-rise. It wasn't that tall a building, but this 12-story building in Florida, part of which collapsed and killed 130 people or something. Well, that was government certified. An inspector had come and said, oh yeah, it's okay. It's okay. And it's pretty clear that it was not. So it's not as if though government regulation and licensure and so on assures quality, and in fact it may make it worse. In any case, why would you always want the service or the product that you're talking about always to be the most luxurious product. You know, we have a brand of automobiles in the United States called Cadillacs, very fancy. Well, I think there should also be Ford cars, not just Cadillacs. So on all kinds of grounds, this intervention, this detailed regulation, as though people from Warsaw or Washington knew better. And there's no reason to suppose they do.
And the last follow-up question I will actually have after your whole speech, actually, it came to my mind right now. What about the intellectual property? You know, the whole thing about the patents, the whole thing about, you know, you think about something and you just do not produce it. You first go to the state, you have to register it, and later on you think what you do with it.
Yeah, well,
is that okay with you?
Yeah, it's okay if it were short. But the trouble is that in a democracy, there's a great pressure to increase the length of the patent, because a patent is a monopoly. Now, it's called a patent because in Latin, the word, it's from Latin. It means showing openly. And that's the deal. You show everyone how you make this new, I don't know, drug or something. But then you have a temporary state-enforced monopoly for 9 years or 6 years. That would be fine with me. But the trouble is it doesn't stay. It keeps getting longer. The same problem with what we call copyright in English, which is a patent on, say, my books.
And some trademarks can last the lifelong or even more than the life of the author.
But I make a distinction between trademarks on the one hand and patents and copyright on the other. A trademark, how can I say this? It's a perfectly legitimate form of property. The Coca-Cola company should have a guarantee of quality, so to speak, by calling itself Coca-Cola and spending millions and millions of dollars on advertising. That acts as a bond, we say it in English, a guarantee of quality. Whereas the problem with intellectual property, I've actually written on this, is that after the discovery is made, the correct price of the knowledge is zero. Now, of course, if there are all kinds of reasons to be against the present intellectual property rights system we have. I mean, there are all kinds of arguments. For one thing, in most fields, most industries, most ideas are not patented. They're so-called trade secrets. You develop a new way of making plastic bottles. You don't tell anyone. You just
keep it secret.
You just keep it secret for as long as you can. Then someone else reverse engineers your new plastic bottle and they figure out how to do it. But you get the main profit from a new idea is in the quite short run, in a few years, you establish yourself as the big, excellent plastic bottle maker. So I'm against the whole system as it actually operates.
I see. Well, and I guess my viewers will fully understand your point of view. So I will proceed to the next big question. Does the free market lead to the social and civic freedom?
No, I don't think it does. Alas, I wish it did. My colleague and friend Milton Friedman, a long time ago, claimed that adding markets to a country like China would, he believed, tend to make them freer in other ways, in political ways and social ways. And indeed, in South Korea and in Taiwan, that's kind of how it worked. But if you have a situation like in China with a very powerful communist state, which is popular, it's still quite popular, partly because it lies to its people and won't allow them to get correct information through a free press. They don't have a free press. But in any case, the Communist Party is very popular because of economic growth in China, because the Chinese economy since 1978 has been very successful. So, and I think in the long run, a tyranny like that can't succeed. But the long run might be very long.
Okay, I see. But may we actually focus now on the Western world?
Certainly.
We can clearly see the correlation between citizens getting richer, the inequalities being actually bigger and bigger every day, but the whole wealth of the nation getting stronger and, well, the nation getting richer day by day. And what's my point is, we can clearly see the difference between the poorer East and the richer West in terms of civil liberties, the LGBT rights, the, I don't know, rights to abortion, the open-mindedness, the, I don't know, even focus on the immigration. The whole difference correlates with the economic ratings.
Well,
do you agree with that? That we can clearly see the, the whole correlation right now?
No, I don't think so. Look, in the United States, as I believe in Poland, as recently as the 1970s, homosexuality was against the law. You went, and lots of people did, especially men, would go to jail, would go to prison for being gay. Now, that wasn't true in Southern Europe, France, Italy, Greece, Spain. No, there were never any laws against homosexuality. But in the North, and again, I'm not sure about Poland, but in the North, in Germany, in the Scandinavian countries, in England and Holland, there were laws. And yet this was the home of innovism. Northern, especially Northwestern Europe, was the most oppressive to LGBT people. I'm a trans woman myself. I transitioned in 1995, and it was barely legal then. Now, of course, it's in the United States, at least, and in Europe, it's become completely commonplace, and there's not much of a problem. Although there are always reactions. Freedom moves forward, and the conservatives react, moves back. And I'm hoping that in Poland, this move back from freedom will be overcome, and you'll start moving forward again. But I don't think it depends very much on income. I can, one can easily see the psychology that might suggest that. Say, well, look, I'm free in my economic activities, as on the whole, people in China are now. They weren't under Mao, but they are now, although Xi Jinping is trying to move back to Mao. But anyway, they're free. They've been free now for 30 years. And they like that. And then you can see psychologically that they might well say, well, why not make me free in other ways? Why can't I vote? And that's something that haunts the Communist Party of China, of course. But unfortunately, I don't think this simply add markets and stir is a formula for a truly free society. On the other hand, liberty is liberty is liberty. Freedom to be who you are without someone who you're not hurting objecting and wanting to put you in jail is true in the economy, it's true in the society, the polity.
Well, I want to address to your concern about the Polish laws and the homosexuality at all. Actually, the homosexuality wasn't punished in Poland, well, anytime actually in history.
Good.
The only state regulated actually homophobia was in the communist period, when the state intelligence or the something like Stasi in Germany, you know, the whole state police, which worked in secrets, gathered information about the notable Polish people who actually are homosexual or did homosexual acts, and actually gathered them to interrogate them. It was actually very, very, well, awful act, to be honest. And many of today's politicians were, or actually still are, in the Polish politics to this day in the left-wing parties. So this is something which is not the greatest card of Polish history, and especially not the greatest card of the left-wing party's history, especially that the left-wing in Poland today is vastly in the opposition of whole homophobia, transphobia, queerphobia at all.
Yeah. Well, this sort of thing is a problem on the left everywhere. I mean, also on the right. But both the right and the left, understand, are statist. Their argument is that you and I shouldn't be deciding for ourselves what to do, what occupations to go in, what to sell, what to buy. We shouldn't do that. We should let the state decide that. And this is true on the left and it's on the right. We liberals are not on this silly spectrum of left and right. We're floating above it, so to speak, because we don't want the state to be so big. We want to be adults. We're prepared to help people out when they're poor, but we're not willing to be coerced to be a slave. Liberalism is a theory of adult free people, whereas all the other political philosophies are slave philosophies, slave or child philosophies. You're either a sad child or a bad child, and the state's got to take care of you like a parent, like your mother or father.
Well, that's a very interesting answer. Thank you for that. And actually, this whole topic about left and right is actually correlated with our next question. Do you feel that today's universities are dominated by the set of left-wing views, Keynes economics included? Do you believe that universities should expand their curriculum to offer more non-mainstream courses, like actually Frankfurt economics or even Austrian economics, following the example like the schools I have actually mentioned before? Do you think that the left dominates in the today's science?
Yes. Now, not across all the sciences, but certainly in economics. Although in American universities, the economists are the most liberal, and sometimes conservative, but mainly liberal. But even they are Keynesian liberals, so to speak. So they're statist liberals, which is a contradiction in terms. Yeah, and certainly in the English department or in the philosophy department, people are mostly on the left. There have been times, by the way, in history in which the professors were mainly on the right. So it's not. This isn't a sort of this isn't an inevitable correlation. Certainly in the 1930s, when in Germany, Jews were being expelled from the universities, it was right-wing people in academic life who were very eager to take their jobs, in the same way that the shop of their cousin was taken over by Gentiles. So, all right. Yes, that's true. And what to do about it, all we can do is preach. All we can do is try to persuade people. There isn't any trick. There isn't any new law we can pass. Although actually laws that prohibit attacks on academic and journalistic freedom are certainly very desirable. The source of the left-wing thinking is a researchable topic. One could learn about it, and I have a theory about it. My theory is that we all grow up in families, and families are socialist enterprises, from each according to her ability, to each according to his need, and they should be. I mean, you don't want to send the 6-year-old children out to work in order to pay for his dinner. I mean, so there's the parents. They're the central planners, and we've all been in the situation of being the child. And mommy and daddy take care of it, and then you do what they say. And so adolescents, teenagers, come from socialist enterprises. So if they don't get instructed in how to have an adult political and economic philosophy, they tend to carry that over into adulthood. And they think, well, just like my family, we ought to have central planners who decide things, and then we're the children. Well, you know, so every generation has to relearn the strength of innovism.
But well, what's actually the way to teach children and young people to not behave like in the social commune of the family? Well, we cannot abolish families.
No, we certainly can't.
Well, quite interesting.
I wouldn't want to do that. On the contrary, but it turns out I've had students who grew up on farms, right, out in agriculture, and they are very good at economics because they understand markets, they understand the function of prices. If you grow up and your parents run a small store, a small shop, and you help out in it when you're 11 or 12 or 13, you also learn it. It's people like me. I was the child of a Harvard professor and was well-to-do, and I didn't have to work. And so there's a danger that such people will not ever learn that work is what makes for production, and prices govern what we work at correctly.
There was quite a heated political argument in Poland quite recently about 15 or 14-year-olds working in shops, helping behind the couriers in the convenience shops, and the left-wing party politicians said it is like almost a child abuse, while the liberals and conservatives said it's the great way to teach a life. So you're actually in favor of the latter sentence. You actually,
I am, but you know, there's a danger. I have lots of friends on the left still, as a former Marxist myself. And I understand their worry, because it can be exploitative. But on the other end, look, it was once the case, I suppose it was true in Poland too, that everyone got a newspaper, and you could be a newspaper boy or girl for that matter, and you went around your neighborhood and you were paid by the newspaper to put the newspapers.
Throw the papers, yeah.
Sure. Throw the papers. And that's very, and that taught people how to budget, how to keep accounts, it taught them that the customers had to pay, and that you had to do it every morning at 6 o'clock or you're not doing your job. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think, you know, when I was at university, I was still a male. So I worked on construction, on building roads. And that was a very good thing for a bourgeois child to do. Because I learned that people who work with their hands and their back are not stupid, and deserve the full respect that's owed another person. And I learned how to work physically. Actually, I learned that from my mother. So, you know, but I agree, there you have to watch it. You can't. But one problem we have in the United States is that those jobs have been legislated. Those jobs that young people take have been legislated out of existence. You can't pay the low pay that a 14-year-old is worth. A 14-year-old doesn't have skills, so she's not worth very much. Yet if you have a law about the minimum wage, you aren't going to hire her.
I see. And the thing that you have said about the working class, about the construction workers, actually correlates very well with the question that I have actually supposed to do in a few minutes, but I will ask it right now.
Yeah.
Is it not true that the capitalist causes the continued preservation of the existing social divides, rich north between poor south, close society? Does the capitalism need the poor to actually work as a system?
No. And look, what
I know it's a very complex question.
It's not that complex. Innovism, that is to say liberalism, replaced aristocracy and feudalism, right? In Poland, there was this very large, I forget the Polish name, but this very large sort of gentry, as we say in English, and then a few high aristocrats. And that was permanent. That lasted for centuries, and it was the same people. Then came innovism, and actually in innovism, the people on top keep changing because they get competed away by new entry. Once department stores were the great source of local fortunes. I'm sure it's true in Poland, but it was also true in the United States. Then department stores got competed away. There were many of them. They got inexpensive stores, and that source of high income was no longer available. That's why I like this word innovism instead of capitalism. This constant churning that comes from innovation means that not always the same people are rich. I mean, Bill Gates, the great American billionaire, came from a very modest family. He wasn't an aristocrat. Now you say, well, let's do it the socialist way. We'll take care of you. It may be true, as I'm saying, that innovism is more egalitarian than is aristocracy. Okay, that's the old argument. But our friends on the left say, ah, yes, but we can improve on it because we can introduce socialism and make everyone equal. But ask your grandfather and mother how things were in Poland under communism. And I'm sure they're very intelligent and observant, and they'll know that under communism, there wasn't equality. If you were a high member of the party in Russia, there were grades depending on your party status for vacation places. And then if you, in the Stalinist era, you were arrested and put in a prison camp, there were grades in the prison camp. It was a hierarchical society. Whereas
it was also a case in Poland, you gain additional points in the universities additions when you are from the working class or from the rural classes.
Supposedly
you actually had a better chance to get to your university if you started from the poorer family and not from the intellectual one.
Yeah, that's right. But how it actually works out is not how it's written down on paper. That's the trouble. In China now, for example, it's extremely advantageous if your parents are members of the Communist Party of China. I've had students here in the United States. Some of them are these brilliant young people who have gotten, they're so smart that they've gotten high grades in all their exams and they get to come to the United States. But then there are other students. My sister is also a professor, and we agree that there are these other students who don't belong in any university. And yet, here they are at my university or at Indiana University studying, and they seem to be very well off, lots of money. They rent an apartment, and they don't study in there, and then they're not good students. Well, who are they? They're the sons and daughters of the Communist Party officials. So, there is this claim that capitalism is unfair, and it's just not. The great football players of Poland earn a lot of money, I take it. There's one who one of the most famous Polish football players plays for the German team, for the Munich team. And I'm sure he's much better off than I am. I'm just a poor, retired American university professor. I know that he has higher income than I do. But do I object to that? No. If you like football, I don't happen to, but if you like football, you want to watch him, right? His name is Robert. What's his last name? Robert somebody.
Lewandowski.
Yes, that's right. And you go and you say, oh, look at how wonderful he behaved. And you're willing to pay for it. What's wrong with that? I pay. I'm willing. I do it voluntarily. He accepts the money voluntarily. What's the complaint?
Of course, I see. But the whole point about this cycle of being poor and rich of America actually may be countered by the argument of the statistics of social mobility.
Yeah.
USA has one of the lowest social mobilities of the developed countries. But let me finish. But the social regulated countries of the Scandinavia, like Denmark and Norway, have one of the highest.
Yeah.
So, to simplify it, in Norway, you have a higher chance to become rich even if you're from a poorer family, contrary to the USA?
Well, becoming rich, I would deny that. I don't think that's true. On the contrary, I think the chance to become rich, I mean, high income, is highest in the United States, the movement from poor to rich. And there are lots of numbers on that. Now, to get into university and so on, there I agree that there tends to be a class sorting, or at least income sorting in the United States. And you know, there are lots of problems. I'm an economic historian, and I'm not an expert on this social mobility thing, but I do know that there have been findings that there are deep problems with this story, that once the United States was mobile and now it's not. But one of the reasons one of the reasons it's not mobile, let's suppose it is, that's correct, that it's not as mobile as it once was, is the increasing regulation of the economy. Housing is a terrible example. In 1938, the American Federal Housing Authority or Agency passed a rule, internal rule, that black people could not get FHA approved mortgages. Mortgage allows you to buy a house. Now, that's essentially what the rule was. So the result was that for 80 years, black people have not been able as easily as white people to get a home, a house.
Which created a vicious circle of poor.
Exactly. And that's not because of capitalism. That's because of the opposite of capitalism. That's because not applying, if racist regulations like that hadn't happened, American blacks would have the same wealth that whites do. As it is now, there's a shocking gap between average wealth. Now, of course, there are great successes like football players or something, but there's a shocking average gap, a factor of 10 in net wealth, a factor of 10 in favor of the whites. Now, what's going on here? Housing. Housing is where it came from. So, you know, because that's the main asset that most people have. So it's not, you have to keep in mind that it's not always, the state is not always a source of goodness. And in Poland and the United States especially, I mean, Scandinavia, yeah, that's nice. They're very nice. I've worked in Sweden. I've taught there, and it's a nice place. And my ancestors are from Norway, some of them, and I've been there a lot. I've gone to Norway a lot, and it's a very pleasant place. But it's much easier.
But there is a but.
It's much easier to govern than is Poland or the United States. And let's take the case of Italy. No intelligent Italian believes that the Italian government should be given more power. Yet they keep voting for statists, for more and more government. It's crazy.
Well, let me add the fact that majority of the Italian Southerners, the population of the South Italy, is mostly employed in the state corporations, state-owned companies. In the contrary of the North, well, stereotypically more liberal and more wealth Italians, which have more private enterprises.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the case of southern Italy, and of course, most of Italian Americans come from the South, because it was, as you pointed out, is the poorest area. And they come to the United States and they do very well. So it's not their southernness which is the problem. The problem is in the governmental institutions they're in. I mean, Supreme Court justices, professors, successful business people, artists. There are tons of Italian Americans, actually superior to, say, English Americans or German Americans. The Italian Americans are. Well, so what's one to make of this? That I think that the problem that Southern Italy has is that it's part of Italy. If it were its own country, where it wasn't getting subsidies from the North or indeed from the EU, then they wouldn't be able to do this thing which you pointed out of all being employed on the public purse, financed from Rome. I've in fact advocated this, that Sicily in particular ought to be an independent country.
I see. Thank you for that answer.
Because it would be healthier in the politics.
Of course. Well, I guess many would argue with that statement, but I'm not the one to judge. So I will actually proceed to the next question, which is one of the most controversial questions asked to the liberals. Of course, the whole environmental problem, the whole climate change.
Yeah.
So the question is, on the topic of the climate change, do you think that the free market can manage the climate crisis on its own, or does it need the help from the state and the regulations?
Sure, it needs the help from the state. There's no question that it does. But that doesn't mean you should take over the private economy. Sensible, modest interventions can solve the climate problem. For instance, a tax on carbon. That's very simple to, it's not a detailed intervention, say you should do this, you should do that. It just presents the private economy with the correct price. If you're sending carbon into the air, you should be taxed to prevent you from doing it. That's one point. The other point is that there are many, many modest, sensible proposals for solving the climate problem, which I agree is caused by humans, and it's a serious problem. It's not as urgent as people claim it is. They're in the newspaper. People say, oh, tomorrow it's going to go to the pieces. I don't know if you've heard about this Swedish schoolgirl who came to the United States.
Greta Thunberg.
Exactly. We don't want to run our economic policy on the advice of a Swedish schoolgirl. I think that's pretty obvious. She's very nice, I'm sure, but she's not an engineer. She's not an economist. She's not even a biologist.
I want to address that the engineers, economics, and environmental specialists meet in the Paris conference in 2018, I guess, and actually made a statement that the whole climate change issue needs to be actually addressed and fixed until the year 2050.
2000 and what?
2050.
Yeah, well, I think we've actually got longer than that, but that's okay. Here's something I do know. I was at a conference actually in Berlin of very sophisticated climate scientists, not on the right or the left or anything like that, just climate scientists. I was among the few economists, and I learned there that the climate models are very complicated, and one of their big problems is clouds. They can't model cloud formation very well. And it's obvious that if cloud coverage of the globe were to importantly, to a large degree, increase. You know, we'd have a lot of cloudy days, but that would reflect the heat from the sun. So it's very important to know what happens to clouds. So okay, there are great uncertainties, but I'm open to the scientific claim that we need to get onto this. I agree with it, but we don't need to be foolish about it, and that's the trouble. If you say, look, crime, we're having a lot of the politics of the United States revolves around crime. Oh, there's a crime problem. There's a crime wave. It's always called a wave, like the ocean. A crime wave. Oh, and then it means we got to put more black people in prison. And this is crazy. This is not correct. We need to punish black people more than white people. That makes no sense at all. So let's not get crazy. Let's think of simple things to do. There's a Danish engineer. His name is Lundborg, and he's controversial, but he's very intelligent. And here's one of his suggestions. It's really simple. It's really cheap and would help a lot in urban areas. He says, paint the streets white. Because one of the problems with asphalt, right, which is our cities are filled with asphalt, parking lots, streets. If you just make the asphalt white instead of black, it would reflect back the heat of the sun to a considerable degree. And he's able to calculate how much the so-called heat island effect in urban areas would be reduced, and it's considerable. So, you know, paint, he's got a lot of suggestions, sensible ones. He says, look, paint the tops of buildings white. Well, okay, that wouldn't cost very much. And again, all the tops of buildings would be, or make them green. Put grass on top of them. So there are ways of doing this that don't involve radical changes in the economy. Because if we do radical changes, we're going to be putting Warsaw and Washington in charge of our economies. And that is a big mistake.
Of course. And I want to also address that the whole education system, the whole learn from the basics is very important. For example, in the city of Łódź, there were plans to actually make a new city square, like a very concrete pen, like no trees, no bushes, only concrete and some benches. And with the public outrage, the public petitions, the whole plans were changed to actually not make a very big pen to fry people over, but to make some actually changes to make a park in the city center. Yeah. Do you think that the whole popular mass can make a bigger difference than actually a bunch of scientists saying some clever words?
Well, I agree. I was in Łódź a couple of years ago. I've been there. No, I agree. And I think democracy is important. You see, look, the market is an extremely democratic institution. You say, oh, no, wait a second. It's all the rich people, they get the stuff. No, that's not right. Because if there are enough poor people, they decide with their purchasing decision what's to be made. So markets are extremely egalitarian in that way. And they're extremely flexible. I have a roommate now who's in marketing, right? She's a marketing researcher. And a month ago, she was working on a report on, now here, this is very bizarre, dog treats, okay, for your dog, treats.
Mm-hmm, of course.
The dog treat industry. And do you know how many different kinds of dog treats she had to look into?
No idea.
1,700. 1,700 different companies making dog treats. Now, although it sounds kind of crazy, that's how you get good dog treats. That's how you get good anything. You try it out. Now, and then you choose, the customers choose. Now, the same thing should be true in politics. I mean, I'm a big opponent of city planning because it tends to be top down. You people are stupid. You people are children. You people are children, bad children or sad children, and we're gonna take care of you. There's a joke in the United States. I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. The three most unbelievable sentences in English. That's the third one. I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And you know, Ed, to go back to an earlier point, in Sweden, that might be true. In Sweden, the political way of making decisions might be the best way to do it because they're so law-abiding and they're honest and blah, blah, blah. Whereas I won't go into whether Poland is an honest country or not, but I can tell you my country is not. I'm from Chicago. It's not just Polish politicians, but Irish politicians and English politicians and all the others. They're all terribly corrupt. In fact, it's interesting. Chicago in the late 19th century, late 1800s, was the fastest growing city in the world. And it was fantastically corrupt. So I'm not, if the government is small, and it was in the late 19th century, the corruption doesn't matter very much.
But today, Word.
But today, these states in Poland or the United States or anywhere else, they're enormous. I don't know what the share of national income taken by all levels of government in Poland is, but it's very high. It has to be well over 30%, maybe 40%. And whereas in 1900, it was 10%.
I see. So the conclusion from this statement is actually give power to the people. The people will decide.
That's a very good way of expressing it. I'm going to use that. That's right. Give power to the people. That happens in markets. It happens in open, uncorrupt democracy as well. The danger, of course, in democracy is that minorities get oppressed. So if you're queer and the conservative Catholics are voting, they're liable to make your life unpleasant for no good reason, just because they don't like you. And that can happen in politics. It can't happen in the marketplace. If I want to buy a Polish sausage, in Chicago, it's very easy to get Polish sausages. I go down to the store and I buy a Polish sausage, and no one stops me. No one says, that's weird. Why don't you buy German sausages? What's wrong with you? I actually prefer Polish. It has more spices.
Well, I guess many Polish fans of you will be actually content with this statement. But we get one last question, which will be, I guess, the biggest one and the hardest to answer. The question is pretty simple, actually. What is the future of capitalism and liberalism? Will we see the upcoming bloom of liberal values all around the world? Or maybe the Marx was right, and the capitalism will collapse under its own weight?
Well, Marx was wrong. I was a Marxist, as I told you once. And I often say that Marx was the greatest social scientist of the 19th century, without compare. He asked the right questions. Unfortunately, all his answers were wrong. It's not true that capitalism was on its last legs, which is what he said. It's not true. You know, for God's sakes, the communist revolutions happened in exactly the wrong countries, according to Marx. It should have been in Germany and Britain and the United States that the socialist revolutions happened. Instead, they happened in Russia, and then in all places, China. So he got everything wrong. And in particular, I would claim that liberalism is natural to humans. And the reason it is that you can make actually a theological argument. I told you I was a Christian, and God gave us, according to we believers, God gave us free will. And I actually wrote an essay on this that was published in January. Free will implies a free market. That's my claim. But you don't have to be theological about it. You can also be anthropological. And it's well known, it's the case, that we humans, Homo sapiens, and even the ones before, the hominids before, were hunter-gatherers. And hunter-gatherer groups of 12 or 15, and max 20, were very free. If you didn't like what was going on in your group, you could leave tomorrow very easily. Exit was very easy. I'm not sure about entry, but exit was very easy. So we, for hundreds of thousands of years, lived in free societies. The problem came with agriculture. When we invented agriculture in a number of different places, Central America, Northern China, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, et cetera, et cetera. In all those places, we invented agriculture. With agriculture came clans, tribes, with big hierarchies. And that's where, but we haven't been agricultural for very long, biologically speaking. So our genes are liberal, is my claim.
Okay, if the genes are liberal, well, that's the history. We can see that actually, for the hundreds, thousands of years, we are free. We were not restricted by anything, actually.
Hierarchies, that's right.
But today, we can see the ultra change in societies. The two biggest countries are run by the socialists. In India, the Socialist Democratic Party rules. In China, one of the fastest growing economics, the Maoist rule.
Well, I don't think you're correct about India. India is governed by a conservative government of Modi.
I try to say what they are officially saying about themselves. What is the real? Type of rule is pretty different. They call themselves socialists.
Yeah.
They want to work for the equality of Indian people, fight the castes, fight the social structure of the whole,
that
almost continent.
Yeah. I know a fair amount about India, and what the change is. After 1991, India moved in a liberal direction. Now you're suggesting, which I think is true, that it didn't get all the way, but under Gandhi, not Gandhi the old one, but the Gandhi family, and Nehru and so forth, they were attempting to be a socialist country, and it worked very badly. Economic growth was, and since 1991, Indian economic growth has been 5 to 8% per year per capita. I mean, that's amazing. That changes everything. And in China, it's been even faster since 1978.
In the end of 20th century, China was, almost equally in terms of GDP to Poland.
I know
the country so much smaller, and in 40 years we see one of the biggest growths in human history, I guess.
Yes, although the small, large countries I don't think matters very much. Size of the absolute size of the country is not to the point, because Hong Kong grew much faster than China grew. Hong Kong, of course, in 1947 was as poor as was the mainland. in 30 years, maybe 40, its income was slightly below that of the United States per capita. So it's not the fastest growth that has ever happened in world history. It's fast, and I agree, and I'm all for it in China, and I very much approve of this. But see, it's like our first discussion. You can have part of freedom, and that's what they did in China. That you're free in the economy, but not in anything else, and that worked. But let's focus then on this final question, which is the future. And I think the future of the world is liberal. If the future of the world is China, a tyranny, then it's like George Orwell's 1984. There's a famous image in that book in which the party man is explaining to Winston, who's the hero of the book, what the party man's vision for the future is. And he says, if you want a vision of the future, think of a boot standing on a human face forever. That's the statist outcome. As a famous English historian said, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what we need is societies without concentrations of coercive power, physically coercive power.
Well, that would be a great way to end the interview, but I can't let you go that fast. I have to also mention the new administration of the United States.
Yeah.
Recently, the solely superpower in the world. Now it is run by the Joe Biden, which is vastly different from the previous presidents, especially with Donald Trump. And well, even in the recent biggest news, he conducted with the 130 heads of the states and want to implement global 15% of corporate tax to end tax havens, to end tax evasion from the country to country. Well,
I hate that.
Do you think that will actually hurt global economics? It will actually hurt the World Trade Organization's rights? What will be the future of Joe Biden and the whole United States under him?
Biden is a tremendous improvement over this monster, Trump. Trump was like your guy right now. He was a fascist. Now he was stupid. He is stupid. So thank God he wasn't as smart, not as intelligent as Putin or Erdogan. If he was, we would have been in real trouble. But this idea of 15% corporate tax is stupid. Ireland, the Cayman Islands, a bunch of other places will cheat on it anyway. You just know they will. But I'm not enthusiastic about the government getting money. That's one point. If tax havens prevent the German or American government from getting more money, I'm all for it, smaller government. But the other point is that the corporate income tax, it can be argued, it's a controversial point, falls on workers. I mean, there isn't any such thing as a corporation, so to speak. Corporations, of course, are owned and purchased from and worked at by people, right? Actually, it's only people who pay taxes. It's not some entity called corporations. So you tax the corporation. Who actually pays it? And there are
the customers and the workers.
Many economists feel that it's the workers mainly who pay for it. Now, that may not be true because it's very hard to know. And that's actually one of the problems with the corporate income tax. If you say, oh, well, maybe it's capital that pays for it or the capitalists. Well, maybe, but we don't know. Why do you want a tax where you don't know who's paying it? The income tax, if you're taxed by the Polish government, income tax, you pay it for it, dear. And I pay it, I'm sorry to say. But that, at least we know who pays it. We're not accidentally taxing poor people, which is what the corporate tax may well do. So there you are.
Well, that's a hard answer to actually process, and well, of course, it will be addressed many times by our viewers, especially with more left-wing views, which are more in favor of that. And
Sure.
one thing consisting of American politics and whole economic structure of the state, many people also want to ask you, is the whole migration problem with, of course, mostly Mexicans, but whole South America actually at the point. My point is, do you think actually the restrictions of the border crossings, the whole big wall, will work, or actually America need these workers from the Latin countries?
I don't think the wall will work. That's stupid. People will go in tunnels. Come on, it's not going to work. It's a stupid thing to do.
But the question is bigger than will the war work?
But I don't want it to work. I've got as I've told you, I got Polish friends in Chicago who came to the United States. Actually, my bathrooms were remodeled by Polish workers, Polish electricians, carpenters, and so on. They had come from Poland, and these weren't the descendants of Poles. They were Polish. In fact, the sort of master carpenter on the job, he spends about 6 months in the United States every year and 6 months back home. Among other things, he helps his brother build houses. This is how we should be trading with each other. His skills.
And we should be allowed to transfer between country and country, right?
Exactly. I'm in favor of free migration. Now, that's impossible in a country like the United States. We won't do it. People say, oh, how about welfare and so on, welfare payments and so on and so forth. But I think that could easily be taken care of. There's this primitive idea. You look, in the United States, we're all immigrants. I don't have any Native American blood. I'm Irish and Norwegian. That's it. It's very boring. I wish I was Eastern European or African or something, but I'm not. I'm just boringly Northwest European. But we all came here, and yet there's all through American history, there's this attempt to close the border once I get in. And it's a terrible thing. As you know, Eastern Europeans, Poles in particular, or of course they were not Polish at the time. They were mainly Russians. The gate was closed on them in the 1920s.
But they still came.
No, they didn't come. There was a remarkable fall in migration from Eastern Europe and from Southern Europe, which had been the big bulge around 1900. That's when most of the Poles and Italians came to the United States. And it wasn't until the 1960s that this stupid system of attacking the recent migrations, which at the time were recent, was overturned. And we have a terrible immigration system. But it should be freer. It should be possible. Because look, I don't know what your experience in Poland is. There's a lot of anti-Muslim feeling in Poland. I know that. But those Muslim immigrants to Poland, if they want to live in Poland, mostly they don't. They want to go to Poland so that they can easily
transfer to Western Europe, right?
To Germany is where they're going. That's where they want to go. So they walk across the border. But if they want to become Poles, you should welcome them, because our American experience with Polish immigrants and all other kinds of immigrants is that they're the vital people in the society. It's not the old people, the existing people who are the entrepreneurs. It's the people who came because they loved the freedom of the United States. So I'm in favor of immigration, and it wonderfully complicates your culture. I mean, imagine the United States without Jews. We would have American humor would be German humor. You know, there's a big book, big volume entitled German Humor, and the pages are all empty.
That's German humor is definitely not a laughing matter. That's
not
for sure.
Very good. So, and imagine, you know, American food without the Italians or the Poles or people coming and making it more interesting. So I'm in favor of free migration. Well, dear, it's been.
Thank you for this interview. It was, well, a huge pleasure to be a host for this so much informative, so interesting conversation between you and me. And I hope you actually enjoy it and you've spent a pleasant time with me, and you answered a very interesting questions to me and to my viewers.
Well, I want to get back to Poland. I've been to a few cities. Krakow a long time ago, and Warsaw and so forth. I'd like to explore your country much more. Go to the forests and so forth. So
you are always welcome here. I can say that.
Thank you. Please. Okay, dear. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much for this interview. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks our viewers for this whole spectacle. I hope you find it well. I will only invite you for our @personam Instagram, @personam Facebook, and to watch our debates and interviews in the future on our YouTube. Thank you for that.
Okay, dear.
Okay. Thank you once again, Professor. It was a huge pleasure.